I want to ask about some of the free speech battles within universities that you've also been involved with. Because, of course, the university sector, probably above all others, maybe the exception might be charity sector, has been very successfully captured by progressivism. And someone with the modal views of the general public is absolutely not welcome to speak in a lot of university venues.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. It wasn't always the case. The kind of groupthink really took off, I suppose, probably 30 years ago, 40 years ago. Think of all the big battles between Thatcher and the universities, which led to the 1986 Education Act, which was the first time the government started trying to address the problem of groupthink within the universities. It was in principle, quite a good piece of legislation, protecting visiting speakers, protecting staff and students from incursions on their freedom of speech and on academic freedom. But it's turned out to be completely toothless. It was hardly ever enforced. And then I think about, 2012, 2013, the kind of cultural revolution is really gathering pace and sweeping across universities in the States, and then beginning to really hit the universities here. I wasn't really aware of it until I think it was 2014. I'd just gone over to Oxford to do a research fellowship, and I remember organising or helping to organise a debate on abortion. This must have been around about November 2014, which was created a real firestorm. And naively, I thought that this was a group of feminists who just didn't want the abortion issue to be discussed at all. But I went and had a cup of coffee with one of the people who cancelled the event, or forced Christchurch, the college, to cancel the event, and I pointed out that although we had invited two men to debate the issue, this wasn't something that we always did. And the following term, we were organising an event that was actually entirely women, and so on. And I remember, I'll never forget what she said. She said, no, the problem was not that you invited two men. The problem was that you invited two men. What was it? What did she say? Yeah, two men who were cis. And I said, well, what on earth is cis? And she had to explain to me the transgender ideology. I'd never really come across it before. And I said, so if we'd invited two people for whom it would be a biological impossibility ever to be faced personally with the issue of whether or not to terminate a pregnancy, you would have been okay with that? And she said, yes. And that was a sort of Damascene moment for me. I suddenly sort of found myself peering into this abyss of the Cultural Revolution as it was beginning to break in Oxford. And I think that was a wake-up call for me. I really thought, my goodness, things have changed at a speed that I hadn't fully understood. This is no longer the old debates that we saw in the 80s and the 90s between left and right, which had broadly, when I was an undergraduate in the late 90s, had pretty much vanished. I mean, it was a real sort of, it was a real kind of Fukuyama climate. Nobody was really interested in politics at all in late 90s, early noughties. It just wasn't an issue. So at that point, 2014, 2015, and then Brexit, of course, and I've been a Brexiteer since I grew up in Brussels. I've been a Brexiteer since I was 13, 14, and it quickly became apparent that I was the only member of my college who at least was out of the closet on the Brexit issue. And I realised also that there wasn't a single member of staff, not a single porter, not a single gardener or groundsman who was a Remainer. And so we had this extraordinary split. All the butlers and all the porters, all the kind of the people who made the place run were diehard Brexiteers, and all of us, almost all of us, were for Remain, and so that too sort of made me realise just how fragmented we were now as a society, and I then came over to Cambridge, back to Cambridge in I think 2018, 2019, and then there was a whole series of events, sort of cancelled speakers, junior researchers who didn't have tenure getting fired or reprimanded or put through kangaroo courts. And those were very helpful incidents, although they didn't go to the heart of the problem, which is much, much deeper than a speaker being cancelled. They did, I think, concentrate the mind of the attention of the media and the general public on what was happening.
I think one of the things that you're very good at as a somewhat dissident academic is finding the right places to push and then pushing just hard enough. So inviting speakers who you know are going to cause a ruckus, but also who are so obviously appropriate for, so like for instance, inviting Jordan Peterson to come and speak at Cambridge, one of the most famous, successful public intellectuals in the world, obviously going to draw an enormous crowd, obviously going to be enormously popular wherever he goes, and yet can't step foot on a university campus, particularly Cambridge, without attracting protests and so on. I think these are the sort of incidents that then people see in the newspapers and they think, what is going on in these institutions?
Well, you're giving me, it's very kind of you to say so, but you're giving me way too much credit. I mean, with him, I think we met 2018 or so, and just had a very, very long dinner, very long conversation. I'd not really heard of him and didn't understand at that time what all the fuss was about. But the conversations evolved, and I think at that point I was still in Oxford, but coming over to Cambridge, and then this fellowship was arranged for him. And anyway, we thought it would be, it'd be really productive. And he's got some quite unusual, idiosyncratic views on religion, and we thought that grounding him in Cambridge for a term would do him a lot of good. And it wasn't meant to be a provocative move. But then when he was ousted from the fellowship, because of the scale of his following, it just hit the headlines, and it all really got wildly out of control. And I felt a bit bad for my colleagues in the Faculty of Divinity here in Cambridge, because I don't think there's any other faculty in Oxford or Cambridge that would have even confirmed the initial invitation. I mean, often it's the case, that the institutions that often are kind of at the sort of that bear the brunt of these sort of cancellation scandals reputationally are often the ones that are willing to at least sort of take the kind of risks that the really, really captured progressive institutions are not willing to take at all. And so anyway, that and a number of other incidents, it has changed the climate a little bit. And I would say that on balance, the sort of intellectual culture in Oxford and Cambridge is far, far better than what you would find in Harvard or at Stanford or Princeton or Yale. It is still the case that, I don't know, I could count on one hand the number of conservative academics I know here in Cambridge. But I don't feel in any way sort of persecuted for the views that I hold. I just feel that, there isn't the sort of quality of informed debate that we ought to be modelling for the general public. And, whether it's on climate or race or gender or sexuality or Brexit, you would want there to be, not parity, not a kind of 50-50 necessarily, but, if it was 70-30, 80-20 on a contentious issue, that would be, that would give the kind of oxygen we need for good, informed discussion. But it's not that. I mean, once you hit a certain tipping point, then groupthink really sets in. And, once you've got a spread of 90, 10, 95% of people taking one particular view on a highly contentious ideological position, then the purity spirals really, really start, and minority opinion is demonized. And I've said this before, that the problem with groupthink is that wrong think becomes evil think. You become your views are not just wrong, but morally suspect, and that's cancer for any intellectual culture that prizes truth or prizes the pursuit of truth. So, we've seen those incidents in Cambridge, whatever it was, 3 or 4 years ago, and there are others in Oxford, there are others in Cardiff and Exeter and elsewhere, did prompt a serious debate at the highest levels of government. And one of the very, very few manifesto pledges that the Tories seem to have honoured is taking a close look at what can be done in higher education policy. And this discussion crystallised into a policy commitment to primary legislation focusing on academic freedom, and that was passed last year. The Freedom of Speech Higher Education Act, and that's coming into force properly on the 1st of August, unless Labour try to torpedo it, which I think is unlikely.